A multitude of significant events have unfolded across the globe, and today, we delve into some crucial developments. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support is vital for our growth and allows us to continue bringing you important news analysis. Also, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our diverse audience. Have you ever found yourself contemplating why certain nations seem to effectively bar entry when American citizens arrive? Why does that familiar blue passport no longer guarantee passage across every international boundary as it once seemed to? This isn't a matter of chance. It transcends mere political maneuvering. And crucially, it isn't invariably linked to security considerations. Certain countries have established firm boundaries, making access significantly more challenging for Americans. The policies enacted during the Trump administration undeniably played a role in reinforcing these restrictions, contributing to a shift in global dynamics. The consequences of these actions, ranging from contentious travel limitations that ignited worldwide condemnation to fractured international partnerships and escalating geopolitical friction, continue to reverberate today. These lasting consequences mean that the landscape of international travel for Americans has been fundamentally altered. So, if you harbor the notion that you can simply reserve a flight to any destination without impediment, it's time for a reassessment. Make sure to watch this video until the very end, as we'll be drawing some important conclusions about the current state of international travel for Americans. Because these 10 specific countries have erected substantial obstacles, making visits nearly unattainable for Americans. And we're about to explore precisely why. Let's begin with number 10. North Korea. Imagine a territory where the concept of time itself operates under a unique standard, mandated by governmental decree. This is a reality in North Korea, a place governed by rules unlike anywhere else. It's a nation so intensely regulated that your personal electronics, your attire, and perhaps even the very thoughts you harbor are potentially subject to official examination upon entry. This isn't a scene from a dystopian novel. It is the standard operating procedure in North Korea. And for individuals holding American citizenship, gaining entry is currently not an option. Since the year 2017, the United States government has prohibited its citizens from traveling to North Korea. This decision followed the heart-wrenching death of Otto Warmbier, an American student who was held captive in the country during what began as an organized tour, the U.S. State Department persistently issues warnings regarding the substantial danger of arrest and prolonged imprisonment for any American citizen who might find themselves within North Korea's borders. And it's crucial to understand, this elevated risk hasn't diminished over time. Americans cannot simply decide to pack their luggage and casually wander through the streets of Pyongyang. Even visits intended for humanitarian purposes necessitate explicit authorization, a permission that is rarely conferred. But here's a fact that might genuinely startle you. Tourists from various other nations are sometimes permitted entry into North Korea, albeit under conditions of rigorous supervision and constant monitoring. However, for Americans, the door remains firmly closed. Not a chance. North Korea stands as one of the exceptionally few locations on the planet where your American citizenship alone acts as an insurmountable barrier, effectively slamming the door shut before you even approach. You might be taken aback by what other destinations feature on this restrictive list. Let's move to number 9. Iran. Have you ever attempted to arrange an international trip, only to discover that your visa application was rejected solely based on your nationality? This is the reality for many Americans trying to visit Iran. Welcome to the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country where American citizens encounter more significant hurdles to entry than almost any other nationality worldwide. The relationship between these two powerful nations has been fraught with tension for many decades. However, the situation escalated dramatically during the Trump presidency, reaching a critical boiling point. The travel ban implemented in 2017 explicitly included Iran among several nations subject to stringent entry restrictions for their citizens seeking to enter the United States. Furthermore, tensions spiked dramatically after the U.S. decided to withdraw from the Iran nuclear agreement, a move that sent shockwaves through the international community. What's the outcome of this heightened diplomatic friction? Americans continue to be, for all practical purposes, locked out of Iran. Even individuals traveling for professional reasons, such as journalists and academic researchers, face immense difficulties in obtaining the necessary approvals to enter the country. And as for standard tourist visas, forget about it. They are virtually impossible for American passport holders to secure. And here's a chilling consideration. Even if you manage the complex process of getting into Iran, there's no guarantee you'll be able to leave without complications. There have been documented cases where U.S. citizens, who somehow navigated the entry requirements, later faced arbitrary arrest and detention within the country. The U.S. State Department doesn't mince words. It flatly advises American citizens against traveling to Iran under any circumstances. Consider the implications of this stark warning. Iran is a nation boasting a rich tapestry of ancient history, breathtaking architectural marvels, and a deeply vibrant cultural heritage. Yet, if you hold an American passport, this fascinating destination might as well be located on another planet, entirely inaccessible due to the current political climate and associated risks. Now, before we proceed to the next country on our list, please take just a moment to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Doing so helps us immensely in continuing to produce content that explores these eye-opening global truths. Every click supports our mission to keep you informed, engaged, and equipped with facts you might not encounter elsewhere. Ready to discover more? Let's explore another challenging destination. Imagine wanting to visit a country where diplomatic missions have evacuated their staff, and entire cities are effectively run by armed factions vying for control. Here's the stark reality. Visiting such a place is almost impossible if you are an American citizen. Stick around, because the situation unfolding in our next country will likely leave you speechless. Number 8. Libya. Consider this scenario. You're planning a trip, perhaps seeking adventure or cultural immersion. But what if the primary airport in the country you intend to visit is functioning at minimal capacity, hampered by instability and conflict? What if the capital city itself is fragmented, divided amongst various armed groups, none of whom fully recognize the authority of the others, leading to a volatile and unpredictable environment? This precise situation is what you would likely encounter in Libya, assuming you could even secure entry in the first place. Americans are essentially barred from traveling to Libya. The United States Embassy located in Tripoli ceased its operations back in 2014 due to escalating security concerns, and critically, it has not resumed services since that time. What led to this drastic measure? The reason lies in the profound fragmentation of the country. Libya has been grappling with intense internal conflict, resulting in the emergence of rival governing bodies and numerous militias asserting control over significant urban centers and territories. This power vacuum and ongoing strife have created an environment fraught with danger. Explosions and kidnappings targeting foreigners have become alarmingly frequent, often capturing international headlines when journalists possess the courage, and perhaps the means, to report on them from such a perilous zone. But here's a crucial point. Despite the evident dangers, some individuals, driven by various motivations, still attempt to travel to Libya. These include contractors working on specific projects, aid workers committed to humanitarian missions, and journalists seeking to document the complex situation on the ground. However, every single one of these individuals receives stern warnings from their respective governments or organizations. They are entering at their own risk. You are on your own. The U.S. government explicitly states it has no personnel on the ground capable of providing assistance. There are no established evacuation plans for American citizens, no embassy doors to seek refuge behind if circumstances deteriorate. If things go south, there is no cavalry coming to the rescue. Do you want some concrete evidence of the danger level? According to the official travel advisories issued by the U.S. Department of State, Libya is designated as Level 4, do not travel. This represents the absolute highest warning level possible, reserved for countries deemed exceptionally dangerous for American citizens. And this classification is assigned for very compelling reasons. Foreign nationals, with Americans being particularly vulnerable targets, have been subjected to violent attacks and unlawful detentions within Libya. There are documented cases where individuals have been held captive for extended periods, sometimes weeks or even months, without formal charges, without justification, and crucially, without any means of communication with the outside world. And even if you somehow rationalize that your trip is purely for tourism, hoping to glimpse Libya's historical sites or natural beauty, the reality is stark. There is no such thing as a genuinely safe tourist excursion in Libya today. There are no government-regulated tour agencies operating reliably, no consistently secure accommodations you can depend on, and absolutely no guarantee that the road you might be traveling on won't abruptly become an active conflict zone. The situation is further complicated by the internal power struggles. You might need special authorization from local authorities to travel between regions, but these authorities often don't recognize each other's legitimacy. That's correct. What one faction might deem approved passage, another could interpret as illegal entry, placing travelers in an incredibly precarious position. Libya isn't merely off the beaten path. It's effectively a complete no-go zone for U.S. citizens due to the extreme and unpredictable risks. And if you still believe these warnings might be exaggerated fear-mongering, consider asking the international aid agencies that have ceased sending personnel into the country, or the commercial airline pilots who refuse to fly into certain Libyan airports because control over those facilities can change hands on a weekly basis. This isn't just about danger, it's about profound unpredictability. And that inherent instability solidifies Libya's position as one of the most inaccessible and perilous places for Americans in the entire world. Number 7. Syria. Imagine a place where once thriving cities have been tragically reduced to piles of rubble, where the chilling sound of airstrikes continues to shatter the nighttime silence, and where border crossings are monitored not just by soldiers, but by an overwhelming atmosphere of suspicion and potential hostility. This is the grim reality of Syria, and if you happen to be an American citizen, gaining entry into this war-torn nation is virtually impossible. Let's be unequivocally clear. Syria has consistently been classified under the Level 4, Do Not Travel advisory by the U.S. State Department for many years. Why? Because it remains an active and complex war zone. While the Syrian conflict might not dominate daily international news headlines as intensely as it once did, the inherent risks for travelers have certainly not disappeared. In fact, arguably, some regions within Syria have become even more perilous due to the existence of power vacuums left by shifting front lines and the entanglement of various regional conflicts spilling across its borders. But consider this. It isn't solely the pervasive violence that prevents Americans from entering Syria. Government policy plays a decisive role. The United States Embassy in Damascus was officially closed and its operations suspended way back in 2012, amidst the escalating civil war, and it has not reopened since. This means there is absolutely no consular support available for American citizens within Syria. There's no one to call if you find yourself in trouble, no official representation to turn to for assistance. Making matters significantly worse, there are documented instances where American citizens have been detained, have vanished without a trace, and tragically, have even lost their lives within the region. There exists no dependable mechanism for tracking or recovering U.S. citizens who fall victim to such circumstances inside Syria. Human rights organizations have repeatedly sounded alarms about the dire situation, yet the pervasive danger persists. Even seasoned journalists and dedicated aid workers face extreme scrutiny and significant risks when attempting to operate within the country. Your digital footprint alone, social media posts, online affiliations, could be sufficient grounds for being flagged by authorities upon entry, potentially leading to detention or interrogation. If you've ever posted anything online that could be construed as critical of the Syrian regime, or even of U.S. foreign policy related to the region, you are already considered at heightened risk. And then there's the state of the country's infrastructure, or rather, the lack thereof. Much of it is simply non-existent after years of devastating conflict. Hospitals, roads, and basic essential services like electricity and clean water supply have been severely damaged or completely destroyed in many areas. Many facilities that do remain operational are often under the control of various militant groups, making access unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Don't count on your GPS or reliable maps to navigate. Some areas are completely off-grid, lacking basic communication infrastructure. What makes the situation even more treacherous is the deceptive sense of calm that might prevail in certain zones at specific times. Just because a particular city or town isn't under active bombardment on a given day does not mean it is safe. The potential for violence remains incredibly high and unpredictable. Arbitrary arrests can occur for seemingly minor infractions, such as carrying the wrong type of identification, taking a photograph in a restricted area, or simply being perceived as being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You would be shocked by the number of individuals, including foreigners, who attempt to navigate this perilous landscape, often driven by necessity or familial ties. However, for American citizens, Syria represents a definitive hard stop. The risks overwhelmingly outweigh any conceivable reason for leisure travel. Every single time, the potential consequences are too severe to contemplate. Now consider this. There's another country where U.S. citizens are explicitly instructed by their own government to leave immediately. No delays permitted, no exceptions granted. We're talking about a nation embroiled in a brutal civil war, plagued by frequent drone strikes targeting various factions, and where kidnappings are a constant threat. It's a place where the rule of law has collapsed in many areas. You'll discover which country this is in just a moment. But before we reveal the next destination on our list, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. That's how we continue to bring you these critical insights into global realities that the mainstream often overlooks. Believe me, the countries remaining on this list present situations that are perhaps even more shocking. Number 6. Yemen. Picture this. What if the U.S. State Department didn't just advise against travel, but issued an urgent directive demanding that all its citizens evacuate a country immediately? That's not a hypothetical scenario or a practice drill. It's the stark reality concerning Yemen, and this directive is currently in effect. This isn't your standard travel warning. It reflects a situation of complete and utter chaos. Americans are effectively banned from traveling to Yemen, and for overwhelmingly justifiable reasons. A devastating civil war has been ravaging the country since 2014, tearing its social fabric apart. Each day brings fresh dangers and escalating instability. Airstrikes, kidnappings targeting foreigners, unpredictable drone activity, and sudden violent armed clashes between various factions can erupt without any prior warning. And here's a critical point. There is no functioning United States embassy within Yemen to provide assistance. The embassy suspended its operations years ago due to the intolerable security situation and has not reopened. If you are an American citizen and, against all advice, somehow find yourself within Yemen's borders, you are completely and utterly alone. There is no help coming from your government. There are no established safe zones to retreat to. There is no emergency hotline to call for assistance. Yemen is unequivocally classified as Level 4, do not travel by the U.S. government, the highest possible risk assessment. And frankly, describing the situation as merely Level 4 might even be an understatement. The official warning details a terrifying list of threats, encompassing everything from active terrorism and health crises due to collapsing infrastructure to the severe risk of arbitrary detention by various armed groups. Even established international humanitarian organizations, which historically operated in Yemen to provide essential aid, are increasingly withdrawing their personnel. Why? Because the situation on the ground has become intolerably unstable and dangerous even for experienced aid workers. But here's a detail that might truly shock you. Despite the overwhelming risks, some Americans, often dual nationals with family ties or those involved in highly specialized aid work, still attempt to enter or remain in Yemen. They frequently end up caught in a terrifying nightmare. The Houthi movement, which controls substantial portions of the country including the capital, Sana'a, has a documented history of detaining foreign nationals, including Americans. These individuals are sometimes used as political bargaining chips in the complex conflict, or worse, disappear without a trace. Many of these tragic cases never even receive significant international media attention due to the difficulty of reporting from the region. If you're contemplating flying into Yemen, simply don't. Commercial flight options are virtually non-existent. Airports have been repeatedly targeted, destroyed, blockaded, or captured by militias, making air travel incredibly perilous and unreliable. And even if, hypothetically, you manage to land, what then? Reliable ground transportation like taxis is scarce and unsafe. Security is non-existent in many areas, and there is absolutely no reliable way to navigate the countless checkpoints manned by various armed factions safely. Need medical assistance? Hospitals are either overwhelmed with casualties from the conflict or have been bombed out of service. Access to clean drinking water is severely limited. Basic services have utterly collapsed in many parts of the country. And don't even consider relying on credit cards or electronic payments. The financial system is in disarray, making them essentially useless. Every corner of Yemen presents extreme danger for outsiders, particularly for American citizens. It's not just a matter of unfortunate timing or being in the wrong place. It's a situation where survival itself is precarious. That's precisely why Yemen stands as one of the most restricted and dangerous places on Earth for U.S. passport holders. Number 5. Somalia. Do you believe pirates are merely characters confined to history books and adventure movies? Think again. There remains a place on Earth where modern-day pirates continue to hijack commercial vessels, where powerful warlords effectively govern entire neighborhoods and districts, and where extremist terrorist groups maintain control over significant swaths of territory. That place is Somalia. For American citizens, gaining entry into Somalia is almost entirely impossible and fraught with extreme danger. The United States does not operate an embassy in Somalia providing regular consular services. The last time a significant U.S. diplomatic presence existed, it required a full-scale military rescue operation for evacuation during the intense conflict of the early 1990s. Since that time, fundamentally, little has changed regarding the underlying instability, except that the dangers have arguably intensified and evolved. Somalia continues to be designated as Level 4. Do not travel by the U.S. State Department, and this warning is issued for very serious reasons. Al-Shabaab, a violent extremist organization affiliated with Al-Qaeda, operates with considerable freedom throughout large parts of the region. This group has a brutal history of targeting hotels frequented by foreigners, government buildings, and even civilian populations. You would be shocked at the frequency of attacks that occur within Somalia that never make it into international news headlines due to the inherent dangers of reporting from the area. But here's the reality. The threat isn't limited to terrorism. General crime is rampant throughout the country. Kidnappings, particularly targeting foreigners, are disturbingly common. And foreigners, especially those identifiable as Americans, are often perceived as high-value targets by criminal elements and militant groups alike. If you aren't abducted and held for ransom, there's a terrifying possibility you could simply disappear altogether without a trace. Now, consider this additional layer of complexity. Somalia's basic infrastructure is virtually non-existent in many areas. There is no stable national power grid ensuring consistent electricity. Reliable cell phone service is patchy at best and non-existent outside major urban centers. And in some regions, particularly those outside government control, there is effectively no rule of law whatsoever. If something goes wrong, a medical emergency, an accident, becoming a victim of crime, you are not calling the police, because in many places, a functioning, reliable police force simply doesn't exist. Traveling between cities or even within larger towns, forget about any semblance of safety or predictability. Roads are often under the control of various armed groups or militias, and impromptu checkpoints can materialize overnight, manned by individuals whose allegiances and intentions are unknown. Simply crossing a town could unexpectedly transform into a life-or-death gamble. Even the capital city, Mogadishu, which is considered relatively more stable compared to other parts of the country, remains riddled with dangers. Bullet holes scar buildings, armored vehicles patrol the streets, and neighborhoods can shift from seemingly safe to actively hostile within a matter of hours due to clan disputes or militant activity. And here's arguably the wildest aspect. Your American passport offers no special protection or preferential treatment in Somalia. In fact, it could achieve the exact opposite, making you a more conspicuous target and attracting the wrong kind of attention from those seeking to exploit or harm foreigners. There are numerous reports of Americans being followed, interrogated, or worse, simply for being in the wrong place or drawing attention to themselves. Somalia isn't just off the conventional tourist map. It's effectively off every map concerning safe international travel. For U.S. citizens, it stands as one of the most emphatically forbidden and dangerous countries on the entire planet. Number 4. Venezuela. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the money in your bank account has lost 99% of its purchasing power virtually overnight. Imagine your entire paycheck barely covering the cost of a single basic meal. Imagine being unable to trust the government, experiencing power outages that last for days on end, and finding yourself trapped in a country where even grocery stores require armed guards for security. Imagine that basic necessities, food, clean water, essential health care, are scarce and difficult to obtain. Does this sound like a dystopian nightmare scenario? Unfortunately, this depicts the daily reality of life in Venezuela. Let's be perfectly clear. Venezuela is in a state of profound crisis, a nation experiencing a catastrophic free fall. You would be genuinely shocked to learn how rapidly this country descended from being one of the world's wealthiest oil-producing nations to becoming one of the most dangerous and economically unstable countries globally. Inflation has reached levels that are difficult to comprehend, the highest ever recorded in modern history, rendering the local currency, the bolivar, practically worthless, often compared, tragically, to monopoly money. A standard pack of essential supplies can cost more than an entire month's wages for the average Venezuelan. And here's the kicker. Essential items like basic food staples and critical medicines are in desperately short supply. When these goods do occasionally become available, they are priced so exorbitantly high that the vast majority of Venezuelans simply cannot afford them. But guess what? Even though the government's gross mismanagement and corruption have pushed the country to the brink of collapse, the situation gets even worse for potential visitors, especially Americans. The streets are incredibly dangerous. Crime rates have soared across the entire nation, fueled by desperation and the breakdown of law and order. Kidnappings, armed robberies, and violent assaults occur with alarming frequency. Local Venezuelans live in a constant state of fear every single day. For an outsider, one can only imagine how much more vulnerable and targeted they might be. The U.S. Embassy itself has issued repeated stern warnings. Avoid Venezuela at all costs. And that's not all. Political unrest is rampant and volatile. There are large groups of citizens who are deeply frustrated, utterly desperate, and simply trying to survive in a nation that seems to be losing control entirely. Would you feel safe if you were stranded in a place where every man, woman, and child is locked in a daily struggle just to make it through to the next day? It's not just about the things you cannot buy due to scarcity or hyperinflation. There's no consistent basic infrastructure, reliable electricity, clean water, or functioning sanitation systems are luxuries in many areas. There's no dependable public transportation system. And in numerous parts of the country, there is effectively no law enforcement presence to maintain order or protect citizens. The government's grip on power, led by Nicolás Maduro, is shaky at best, contested both internally and internationally. For U.S. citizens, traveling to Venezuela means taking an enormous, potentially life-threatening risk. Some who have ventured there, often for family reasons or specific work, have ended up trapped, unable to leave, facing immense hardship and danger without a clear way out. Venezuela has tragically transitioned from a nation brimming with potential to a country that even its own people are fleeing in massive numbers, creating one of the largest refugee crises in the Western Hemisphere. And if you are an American considering a visit, think twice, then think again. Because you won't just be facing the inherent dangers of a collapsing state, you'll be caught in the wreckage of a nation teetering on the edge. Number 3. Cuba. You probably picture Cuba as a tropical paradise, don't you? Sun-drenched beaches, world-renowned cigars, and smooth, aged rum immediately spring to mind. It sounds idyllic, right? But here's the unvarnished truth. Cuba is a country of stark extremes. It possesses undeniable beauty, yes, but it's also largely trapped in a bygone era, a sort of time warp where progress has stalled. Life for the average Cuban citizen is far from easy, marked by economic hardship and significant restrictions. Guess what? The Cuban government exerts control over practically every facet of daily life, from the food available to eat, To the people you are permitted to associate with, very little happens without the regime's implicit or explicit approval. This is not an environment where personal freedom and individual liberties flourish. Instead, it's a place where censorship is the norm, and governmental restrictions permeate everyday existence. You might be shocked by how challenging it can be simply to find a telephone that functions outside of the government-regulated network, or to access unfiltered information online. For Americans, traveling to Cuba is not the carefree, uncomplicated vacation you might envision based on tourist brochures. Sure, tourism is permitted, but the United States government imposes specific travel restrictions and regulations that American citizens must adhere to. If you're not meticulous in following these rules, you could inadvertently find yourself breaking U.S. law without even realizing it. Even though diplomatic relations between Cuba and the U.S. have experienced periods of slight relaxation in recent years, the underlying tension and historical mistrust have never truly dissipated. And let's not overlook a critical factor. Cuba has a long-standing reputation for conducting surveillance on foreign visitors. There have been persistent rumors and reports concerning surveillance operations specifically targeting U.S. citizens visiting the island. But what might be even more surprising is the state of Cuba's infrastructure. If you're anticipating luxury resorts with all the modern amenities and five-star dining experiences, you need to adjust your expectations significantly. Basic services that are taken for granted elsewhere, such as consistent running water, reliable electricity 24 hours a day, and stable, widespread Wi-Fi access, are often unreliable or simply unavailable outside of major tourist hubs. So, good luck staying connected if you're trying to book a flight out in a hurry or need to contact family back home during an unexpected power outage. The Cuban people themselves are remarkably resilient, adapting to difficult circumstances with ingenuity. However, they are undeniably trapped within a restrictive system. They live under constant government oversight, with limited access to the global internet and information, and their fundamental rights and freedoms are severely curtailed. Even the most seemingly innocuous conversations might be monitored or intercepted by state authorities. So, if you are an American citizen dreaming of casually relaxing on a Cuban beach and effortlessly blending in with the local culture, think again. The Cuban government does not forget your nationality, and it is certainly not hesitant to keep close tabs on visitors, especially Americans. Would you still be eager to visit Cuba knowing that getting caught up in this highly controlled system could potentially place you in a precarious or dangerous situation? It's definitively not the simple tourist paradise it is sometimes portrayed to be. Number 2. Nigeria. Imagine residing in a country where violence and imminent danger seem to lurk around every corner. Welcome to Nigeria, a nation grappling with severe security challenges, plagued by the activities of terrorist groups, frequent kidnappings for ransom, and pervasive gang violence in many areas. Would you be shocked to learn that in this nation of over 200 million people, vast populations live under a constant shadow of fear? Certain regions, particularly the Northeast, endure relentless attacks and bombings perpetrated by extremist groups like Boko Haram and its offshoots, such as ISWAP, Islamic State West Africa Province. In addition to the threat of terrorism and widespread violence, Nigeria's infrastructure is severely underdeveloped in many parts of the country. This chronic underdevelopment leaves basic essential services, including reliable health care and safe transportation, unreliable and often inaccessible for large segments of the population. And guess what? Even with Nigeria being a major oil producer, possessing significant natural resource wealth, corruption is rampant at multiple levels of society. This pervasive corruption exacerbates inequality and ensures that daily life remains an arduous struggle for the majority of Nigerians. For American citizens contemplating travel to Nigeria, it represents an absolute and undeniable risk. Travelers face not only the ever-present danger of violent crime and terrorism, but also significant health concerns. Diseases like malaria and yellow fever are prevalent in many areas, requiring preventative measures and posing a serious risk to unprepared visitors. This is emphatically not a destination where you want to find yourself caught unprepared or without adequate resources. So, would you still risk traveling there? There's a country where U.S. citizens are told to leave immediately. No delays, no exceptions. Civil war, drone strikes, and kidnappings aren't the exception. They're the rule. You'll find out what it is in a second. But before we move forward, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. That's how we keep bringing you the wild truths the mainstream skips over. And believe me, the next countries on this list, even more shocking. Number 1. Myanmar, Burma. Imagine a nation governed by a military dictatorship that controls every single aspect of life, where peaceful protests are met with brutal suppression, and where the fear of arbitrary arrest is a constant, palpable presence. That is the reality in Myanmar, also known as Burma. This country is still reeling from the aftermath of a military coup that occurred in 2021, overthrowing the democratically elected government. Would you be shocked to discover that thousands of civilians have been killed or detained by the military junta in just the few years since the takeover? In Myanmar, peaceful demonstrations against the regime quickly devolved into violent confrontations with the heavily armed military. Currently, the nation remains locked in a state of widespread civil unrest and armed conflict in multiple regions. Compounding this political turmoil, human rights violations are rampant and systematic. The country's military has been credibly accused of committing numerous atrocities, particularly against ethnic minority groups like the Rohingya, actions which some international bodies have described as genocide or ethnic cleansing. Furthermore, foreigners visiting Myanmar are certainly not immune to government scrutiny and potential harassment. Visiting Myanmar under the current circumstances is an extremely dangerous gamble, especially given that political tensions remain incredibly high and the security situation is volatile and unpredictable. Would you genuinely want to risk being caught in the midst of a brutal military crackdown or becoming an unintended victim of the ongoing civil conflict? These 10 countries starkly illustrate just how perilous international travel can become without a full understanding of the geopolitical realities and safety concerns involved. From nations engulfed in violent conflicts to those ruled by oppressive regimes, imposing severe restrictions, some places should simply be avoided at all costs by travelers, especially Americans, who may be subject to specific risks or lack adequate consular support. If you found this exploration of dangerous destinations eye-opening and informative, please ensure you subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with others who need to be aware of the risks associated with traveling to these challenging parts of the world. We will continue to bring you more in-depth and sometimes shocking content about global affairs, so don't miss out on what's coming next. Thank you for watching.